1966. We just closed the temple the night of the 31st. We worked pretty hard yesterday on the renovating. I'd have give anything in the world if I'd have had this machine 60 years ago so that I could have taped my life's history at that time as I went along rather than to try and do it all at one time now. I find it very difficult to remember all the details of my life that I would like to record at one time, that I would interject my church history at this time, but I think I'll leave that to last and take only my life's happenings through and then return with accurate dates on my church activity from the time I started as a boy, 8 years old, as this is the period of time I brought my life up to. I'll continue on then in saying that we had a very lovely time living on the farm out a mile south and a mile west of Teton City, Idaho. We had a wonderful family. We really enjoyed each other and had much joy together. We worked hard and played hard, and very often we would go fishing. I learned at a very young age how to fish. Enjoyed it very much. I'd like to tell a little instance that did happen, a faith-promoting incident. One day I had caught up on my work and decided to go down to the river and fish. In those days we used an old cane pole, which was pretty heavy. Wait a minute, that would be, yes, cane pole. Down to the river and was fishing. The canal that supplied the water for the a mill over in Rexburg, and also the farms between Teton and Rexburg, run right along by the riverbank, but was much higher, I would say about 15 feet higher than the river, as there was a drop-off in the terrain right at this point. Ran on the lower level. I slipped down over this steep bank and down to the river's edge. The fall of the year, and the river was quite clear. And down in this river, down in the water, I seen a fish larger than any fish I'd ever before seen in my life. Of course, naturally, like any young boy would be, I was very desirous of getting this fish. I baited my hook. I had some minnows, and I baited my hook with this minnow. I dropped it down in the water, and it would float past this big fish, and he'd just move over and let it go. And I kept doing this, and eventually he became angry and reached out and grabbed it and took off. I didn't stop him. He broke my big cane pole right in two, and at the terrific speed and the impact on the tight line tore loose from his mouth, but as it did so, it tore out one of the gills. That's the little red deal in their mouth that they breathe, take the oxygen out of the water with. Well, anyway, I was very unhappy at losing this big fellow, but I had a lot of faith, and I felt that if I prayed that Father in heaven could help me with it. So I knelt down there and I prayed, and I had faith that I would catch this fish. Now the river at this point, as I said, was very steep. Right directly at my feet, at the river, at the water's edge, where the water had washed back into the gravel, there was a little ledge, even with the top of the water, possibly 3 inches across and 2 or 3 feet long. The only level spot, as the other was a very steep incline. As I opened my eyes, I heard a big splashing. I looked out, and here this big, tremendous fish had come up and scooted onto this flat place and stopped and just laid there motionless. Well, I got down naturally, got a hold of his gills and took him to the top of the bank, hustled up the bank clear to the top and hung on to him. On measurement, this fish was very long, as I recall, about 24 inches long, and he weighed 11 pounds. He was a tremendous fish. Now, I'm convinced that the Lord answered my prayers. This fish could have gone anywhere else but that. And then I wanted to say, too, that after I got a hold of him and up on the bank, he put up quite a struggle. But nevertheless, I caught the fish and thanked the Lord for it. This one little fish story took nearly half the tape. At this rate, it'll take a lot of tape to put in my history. Every spring of the year, we would help with the thinning of the beach and the care of them all summer long. And then in the fall of the year, we'd stay out of school long enough until all the beets were harvested, which would usually be in the latter part of October or the 1st of November. Consequently, we lost quite a bit of time in school. But we would always start on time and start late in the fall, but would stay till the closure of the school in the spring would give us. There was quite a little bit of this tape that I have erased, and I'll have to now start and pick up my line of thought. The last recording on this tape was around in September, the latter part of August, before we closed for the temple cleanup, and I'll have to start and recollect my thoughts, as we've had a very hard job of cleaning up, opening the temple, getting it ready to start again. We had a lovely vacation, a lovely visit, Mother and I, as we borrowed Merrill's camper and took a 660-mile trip up first to Dillon, Montana, then around to Missoula, back around through Butte and Bozeman, then again back to Livingston, through Gardner, Montana, and then over into to that entrance to the Yellowstone Park, and then back to West Yellowstone. This night, as we parked out north of Yellowstone, or camped out north of Yellowstone in the campgrounds, we had a visit by a great big bear. I had some milk sitting on the back porch of the truck. This old fellow, it was in a plastic, two-quart plastic pitcher. This fellow started off through the woods with it, and I guess the lid come off, and he lost his grip, and it fell and scared him, and he took off. Anyway, we came on home, and in the process of time, we purchased a new car and decided to go back. Going in on this tape, anyway, to finish the bear story, nothing came of it. We came home that day and took a nice trip back to Dillon that coming Saturday to see Eldon. I had Margaret, Frank, and Patty Christensen drive the car for me, and I relaxed in the back seat. We drove clear up to Twin Bridges, Montana. Then from there we cut back to Enos and over to the earthquake slide area, which was very distressing to see where those people had been buried under the slide of the whole mountain. We came on then through West Yellowstone and back home. We started back in the temple on the 4th of October. Everything's been running quite normally, except they gave me a fine man to help me in the temple. And we've split the shift, so one of us works nights and the other one works days. And in that way, he's learning all the procedure of maintenance of the temple, and it's anything that might come along by way of an emergency, so he can fix it. Today is the 30th of October, 1966. So there's been quite a while since I last recorded. I've had quite a hoarseness in my throat, so I've been unable to talk. In fact, I'm still a little hoarse. History. I left off when I was about 8 years old. Things went along in a normal way, as near as I can tell. World War I came along, as I remember, about in 1914, which rather passed uneventfully as far as a young man is concerned. I continued on and finally finished school, that is the 8th grade. Then we went back to Rexburg after the beet harvest and started high school. But because of the necessity of having men in the Army and taking so many away from the farm at that time, it left a great shortage of help. So they decided to close the school and let us go home and help on the farm. Then the man that had charge of the farm project would come out and supervise our work. This happened to be Brother Melvin J. Luke, who was my supervisor, and I successfully put over a beet project this year. And the proceeds from this beet harvest, I bought an old used car that had been used by Rural Ricks. Had originally bought this Ford for about $360 brand new. He had dolled it up with all the latest gadgets that would make it operate properly, and exceptionally good in those days for a car. And it took my eye, and I bought it. And with this car, we really enjoyed it. Ken would use it quite a lot of the time, and between the two of us, we got a lot of use out of it that summer. I'm reminded of one instance, though, that I feel I should relate here to give you younger people an idea of the difference in travel of now and then. Now I can get in my car, and in 30 minutes I can be in Rexburg, here from Idaho Falls, 30 miles away. But at that time, Father, and it was in the spring of the year, and Father and I decided that we'd go down to Louisville, which is miles west of Rigby, and we started in this car. In those days, though, the roads followed the county lines, and they weren't hard-topped with gravel. They weren't even graded. You just follow along these old muddy roads. And in the spring of the year, as we started in the morning, the ruts was pretty deep, but they were frozen. We could straddle the ruts and get along fine. Then we got down in the Lorenzo Thornton country. We run into quite a little difficulty down there as the roads had started to thaw out a little. But we run into some people there that had some pit full of beautiful apples. And to make a long story short, we continued to try to get to Louisville, but we never did accomplish that feat. We got down just north of Rigby, where that electrical substation now stands, and we were forced to turn back because the day wasn't long enough to let us get to Louisville and back. So we turned around and went back. We got home about 6 o'clock that night. As we had seen these apples, Father conceived the idea that it'd probably be a good idea if we bought these apples, could maybe make some money on them. So I got on a horse and rode up to Teton, and when I got up to Teton, I jumped off the horse to hurriedly go into the mercantile and see if they could use some of these apples. Doing so, I stepped sideways with my left ankle on a big cobble rock. This turned my ankle, nearly breaking it. I've had difficulty because I was so rudely interrupted by the ending of the tape that I had been writing to a fine girl while I was on mission. I'd met this young girl. She and her father had been farming close to our home, and she had herded cows up and down the lane all summer near our place that summer. She was quite young, however. But I had got a lot of encouragement and very nice letters from her while I was on my mission. I wanted to see her when I got back, but I asked her to meet me in Salt Lake, and she wouldn't, so I never seen her any more to tell of her, which I suppose is the way it's supposed to be. I came home in the latter part of March, just a week before conference, and I waited in Salt Lake so I could go to conference. I stayed with Henry Hansen in Salt Lake, and we had some beautiful weather. I visited with my friends out at Sandy, one of my missionary friends, and others that I had known, and waited for conference there for a week and started the conference. And the morning we woke up to go to conference, there was about 12 or 14 inches of snow on the ground there in Salt Lake. It made me very homesick, and I didn't stay for conference. I got on the train and went home. I arrived in Sugar City, and nobody there to meet me, as they didn't know I was coming, and I walked out. And when I went out home, I was very happily greeted by my mother and my brothers. However, they had really had a hard old time of it. They'd had a depression there. They'd had a drought, and very little hay had been raised. It got so that hay had sold for $40 a ton, and they were really in hard straits. This first summer, I stayed home and helped on the farm and done what I could to help make the living for the family. Henry was running the farm, and I stayed and helped all I could. But one Sunday, I'd been called down to Sugar City to preach, and I went down there and met a very lovely, very beautiful girl. I'd known her before, but she was very young when I went on my mission, but she matured considerable when I got back. Her mother asked me over to have dinner with them. This happened to be Sister Frank Jacobs, and I accepted the invitation happily, and from there I guess we fell in love. At least from there we went on to a very happy courtship, and finally I remember one night I'd gone down on a horse to visit and spend the evening with my wife and my very charming girlfriend, and I guess I got the inspiration. It was a very cold night, and I'd taken my saddle in and put it in the washroom right off the back porch, and I had bade her good night, but I got my saddle, and as I went to leave, I laid the saddle down in the hall and reached over the saddle and took her in my arms and kissed her and asked her if she'd marry me. By the way, this is the first time I ever did kiss my wife. Loved her very much, and I couldn't be without her, but until we were engaged and she said yes, I wouldn't take the advantage or the liberty of kissing her. I guess she thought I was a pretty slow Joe. But anyway, from there on, we went on and made plans, and I made plans this spring to go to work for Henry Hodgson up on the dry farm with the huge sum of $60 per month and keep, and worked very diligently all summer at this sum and accumulated the great sum of $300 over the summer period. When it come time in the fall of the year, we had our date all set to go to Salt Lake and be married. Henry was going with Alice Dean in Salt Lake, and we were going down there together to be married, and we had to go at a certain time so I could be back and go into the sugar factory and take my old job, and thereby make enough money so we could start life out. We had planned to go on the dry farm. I had accumulated a lovely team of horses and a new harness for them, and I had pigs and chickens and so forth, and this was our plans. And I went to Mr. Hodgson and told him that the time had come. In fact, he had known all summer of my plans, and he says, "Don't worry," he says, "when the time comes for you to go," he says, "you can go. I'll have the money for you." I didn't want to collect it during the summer, because if I had, it had been spent and I wouldn't have had the wedding stake. So I went to him. I says, "Okay, Henry, now next week we go to be married." Well, he says, I'm sorry. He says, things have turned out like they have, but he says the crops are pretty poor, and he says we've been pretty slow getting started in them. He says, you go ahead, and when you get back to being married, he says, we'll have the money for you. So I went ahead and went into the bank, and I first went to my bishop, who was a very wonderful man, Bishop Jacob Johnson, and told him of my plight. And he says, well, Owen, he says, it just so happens that I've got a couple $100 laying in my dresser drawer that I'm holding to pay my taxes with. And he says, you're welcome to it till you get back. And he says, you won't have to delay your plans. In addition to this, I went and borrowed $50 from the bank, and so as per schedule, we left to go and be married. Now, I must tell you this, you wouldn't travel this way today. Now down number 15, you'll get down to Salt Lake in about 4 hours, but we left Rexburg at 3:30 in the afternoon in my father's old 1916 Studebaker 4-cylinder 7-passenger car. And we figured if we got to Pocatello that night that we could make Salt Lake in one day. Yeah, we got to Pocatello, but we didn't get there till about 6 o'clock at night. Then we got up early at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we left for Salt Lake, and we traveled hard all day. And we finally arrived at Salt Lake at 5 o'clock that night, 11 hours from Rexburg to Salt Lake. We were to go in and be married the next day. There's a few things here that I'd just rather not repeat. I'll let my darling wife tell you of our experience in the big city the first night, trying to conserve a few dimes, what the things that happened. She can tell you that. It's very sacred. It isn't secret, but it's very sacred to us. And I'll let her tell you that. Anyway, we went into the temple the next morning, and we were in there all day long. And that night, I should say this, though, that at that time I walked into the temple, just myself, my darling on my arm, and I walked out. There were two of us. 46 years later, we sat down to the Thanksgiving dinner table, and there were 46 that I could.
But great grandpa, what happened next? Stay tuned for the next one. Okay, bye.